Jordan, thank you so much for making time to talk to me again. Like we've talked before, and I wanted to like follow up with you and all the other Milestone Initiative people eventually. Like that's my like goal is to get just follow up with you guys because you guys all been doing some really cool, incredible work since the Milestone Initiative. So yeah, just wanted to just open it up. How have you been since Milestone? What have you been doing since then and now with Ancestral Recall? Like what have you been doing in between?
Yeah, I mean it's been great just to kind of see everybody's trajectory because I think the point of the program was to get as many people working as possible. And now a lot of us are working in various, forms of comics, whether we're doing a lot of YA stuff like Julio's doing, or we're doing DC or Marvel stuff like Morgan and Ashley. So I think it's been great to kind of be a part of that group. Since then, really just trying to get a lot of different things off the ground. Ancestral Recall is my first creator owned project, so that's a big milestone, pun intended, for me in terms of like getting uh into a space where I feel like that's the goal for a lot of comic creators, is to kind of have their own work that not only that they own but is their specific brand, and can kind of push them into that different level. So I'm hoping that Ancestral Recall is that for me. So generally have been good. The state of the world is tenuous, but comics wise, I've been doing pretty good. Can't complain.
Nice. I love this concept. I read 2 issues. I couldn't find three, but I was
No.
it's not a I don't know why I couldn't find on like books or Comixology, but I will.
Yeah.
But the first two I immediately like I was like, this is a cool concept. How did you come up with this concept? Like there's so many different things and stories and like tracks you can go down with this specific concept. So how did you come up with it?
So it was connected to the milestone program because it was there that they had us do some like character creation workshops. And so one of them was like, make a hero, make a villain. And ultimately, like, they like the villain that I made, but the hero that I made was the prototype for Melvin, because I wanted to do something that felt like it could fit into the milestone, like original milestone world, but was kind of a more, I guess, modernized concept for that. And so really just thinking about Black history, and I think the power that it gives me and the power that it gives a lot of people in terms of knowing these stories, knowing this history, and how Black people throughout not just American history but just general history have been doing so many incredible and amazing things, and wanted to find a way to visualize that, but also to be able to share a lot of these different stories. So I think the initial concept for me was like watching Everything Everywhere All at Once and being like, okay, but what if we could do that, for like, reaching back into history, reaching back into, a lot of these different stories that, some of them are things that people know, but some of them are things that people haven't even heard about. And even for me, like researching it, there was a lot of stuff that I was like, I didn't know this person existed, or I didn't know this person was the inspiration for this, or I didn't know, that these stories and these things, connected in that way. So, very inspired, obviously, just by the long span of history that Black people have been connected to, but also wanting to find a way to merge history and comics, and something that's a little bit more like genre driven as well.
Do you want to like ending like hold on, my question, I'm gonna ask that one. But like how are you picking his ancestors? Like is there a specific process, but also is there a need like a desire to like educate people too with this?
Absolutely, I think so. Part of it was, the thing always with everybody that I picked is like, Melvin is going to need to do something at some point, right? Like he's going to need to know how to ride a horse. He's going to need to know how to, be a sword fighter. He's going to need to have, some technological, idea how to work certain things or do certain things that he has no idea how to do. And so needing to find people that fit into those categories, but also trying to go deeper than just like the first Google search or the first name that kind of comes to mind when you think about those things, because again, there's so many people that you could obviously choose from, and a lot of people that are well known. But I think one of the things too, comics can do multiple things. I think when you think about the origins of comics, and the way that like a lot of people learned English and learned how to read from comics, like way back, like immigrants coming to this country, and kids, because it was like you have the visual and the language connected together. And so, it's something that I think has those educational groundings, because it's accessible, right? Like comics themselves might not always be the most accessible, but the medium is very accessible in sense of people coming to it and being able to kind of intuitively figure things out. And so I wanted to build on that by giving people access to history in a way that's not necessarily just like, there's a lot of books that I really love, even something like March, right? Which is like a very autobiographical story about John Lewis. But at the same time, if you don't care about that, you're not going to read March, right? Like if you don't want to learn more about John Lewis, why would you pick that book up? As opposed to, something like Ancestral Recall, where I'm not trying to trick people into learning Black history, but it is something where it's like, well, maybe you didn't necessarily come here for that specifically, but along the way, you're picking up these things and you're learning these things. And I think it's been great to see the reception from people who have picked it up and been like, man, I had no idea. You know what I mean? And after I read the book, then I went and did all this. I did these Google searches, and then I talked to these people and I told them about this thing, and like they were looking into it, and it kind of feels like it's snowballed in that way. So I'm very grateful that we've been able to impart a lot of these stories and a lot of this history to people who may have not sought it out themselves.
Is there someone you've been researching that you want to include but haven't found an opportunity yet, or like, you know what I mean? Like, or is there any resistance to anyone that you might want to feature?
There was never. I mean, I think that's what I'm grateful for, just in terms of this being published from Ahoy, is that like they've been very supportive of everything, and there was never any like, oh, you can't do that, don't do that. So like I've certainly appreciated the freedom to be able to tell the story the way that I wanted to. There certainly are people that I thought about. I mean, again, one, it's just like, why would Melvin need to know how to do that? Like, how does that fit into what's happening right now? Like, and really just because of the structure of it, right? Like there's 5 issues. And I tried to keep it to about two people per issue, just because I didn't want it to be like I'm throwing multiple names and ideas at you, one after the other. Like I wanted each person to kind of have their own space within the story to feel like, they matter and that they're important. But there were people like, there were like Black jockeys who like came around in like the 1920s and were like, some of the best like horse racers, in the country. There were gymnasts and like acrobats from like the circus in America, but also like just in Europe and other places. Obviously people like Josephine Baker, who like lived an incredible life, did a lot of different things. So I tried my best to keep it to what made sense within the structure of the story. But there's so many people that I'm like, man, if I could find a way, if we get another mini series, or like an additional chance to tell more stories, like I have so many people that I want to figure out how to get into there. So
Dope. Who is Melvin based on? You had said that he was one of your concepts during the Mouse Initiative, but is he based on anyone in your life, or based on you?
I would say, there's always a little bit of you in all of the characters that you write, and for me, I think Melvin represents one, I'm an introvert by nature. And so, I definitely will go out and about and do the things. And I certainly love, seeing friends and family. And, even at times just like being in public spaces, but my battery does have a limit. And, then I'm just kind of like, all right, time to go. And Melvin certainly has elements of that, where he's not always happy to be around people. But I think my main inspiration was Thelonious Monk, who was like a very, like I mean, to call him eccentric, I don't even know if is quite apt, just because he, certainly had a lot of things going on that if he was alive today, I'm sure he would have got a very specific diagnosis. But like he had a way of being that I think fit him specifically, but also just in terms of like, you know, even you know, thinking about it, unfortunately, like D'Angelo just passed, and he was
Mhm.
somebody else that like loved the music, like loved to do the music, loved to perform the music, loved to be in the studio with people. Didn't really like talking to people on camera, like didn't necessarily just want to do an interview just because you requested it, didn't necessarily want to, you know, just be out somewhere because that's what he was supposed to be doing. Like he probably would have just loved to be in the studio. Like I read a story today that apparently during the development of Red Dead Redemption 2, he would just go to Rockstar Studios late at night and like play the game and just
So cool.
just because he really liked the game. And he would, and every morning, you know, people would come in and he'd be leaving, and he'd be like, it's great, you know, I love it, you know what I mean? And like was just having such a great time doing that. And so I feel like Melvin is one of those people who has a very rich inner life, you know, like he's living in his imagination, he's thinking about his art, he's thinking about, you know, all of these things that he wants to do. And it is a barrier between him and the world, you know, in that way that he's like not always present, not always you know, easy to understand or talk to. And Thelonious Monk was a lot like that. But I also felt like, you know, somebody who certainly had a place in, you know, black art and black history as well, and wanted to kind of, you know, bring as many elements of that into Melvin's story as possible.
I actually think that was one of my two of my favorite things about the way you write this. Is one of them is the little grumble bubbles above his head, where like he just says nothing, but it's saying so much, and I just like feel like that's so relatable. And also just
Mhm.
the way he like thinks and talks about June, I think is so sweet, and like you can really like tell and how much he cares about her. And I love that. Like, how do you go about like writing that kind of love story, especially because her missing, June missing is like driving him to do things he
Mhm.
would never do. Like you were talking about him being he's like kind of an introvert and like so like he's now pushing himself out there to find her and doing things he probably wouldn't have done. I think, how do you like take him on that journey?
Yeah. Well, again, that's Thelonious and his wife Nellie, who was like very much his rock and his inspiration. But I think they both had they both had things, you know, where it's like, you know, Nellie needed Thelonious to kind of to push her in certain ways, and in private, you know, I'm sure their relationship was very different from what people saw, you know, just when they're out and about. But like Nellie was the one, like Nellie made sure that he got paid. Nellie made sure that he made it, you know, where he was supposed to go from, you know, the airport to the venue back to the hotel. Like Nellie made some of his clothes. Like Nellie was like very much everything for him. And so I really wanted to take the foundations of that relationship where, you know, you might look at it from the outside and say, well, what are these people getting from each other? Like one person seems to be very dependent on this other person. This other person seems to be doing a lot and maybe not receiving a lot in return. Um, but when you get inside of that relationship, when you see how those people work together and what it is that really like connects them and brings them together, it can be hard sometimes to like make it clear and plain on the page, but you know, I think I tried my best to really get into those intimate moments between them so that, you know, you could really understand like these are two people who are in love, and they've been in love for 30, 40 years, and like they kind of have their ways and all of their like different routines and things that make sense to them and maybe don't make sense to us, you know, but like they are two people, especially when you get to that age, you know, they're both you know, in their 60s, and it's like this is it, right? Like we're together and like we love each other, and I don't think we really need much else. So like as long as this works, like that is what is gonna, you know, kind of give you that motivation day to day. But the second that that is ripped apart, it's like, well, I don't know what to do anymore, because this was my person. Like this was the person that made me not just feel whole, but like gave my day to day that meaning. And so, you know, once Melvin loses that, um, it's part pushing him, like you said, to do things that he would never do on his own, you know, and kind of forcing him into these uncomfortable situations. But it's also just a reminder to him, just like how much June means to him and how much, you know, he wants to have her be a part of his life. And so, you know, it's as much of a historical drama as it is a love story, because I really wanted that to shine
Mm.
through, just like that relationship being the basis for everything else you see in the story.
Love that. Let's talk about Myron. Is that how you pronounce her name?
Yes.
Why this archetype, particular, like this Gen Z, very like she's so cute, but why this character? Why did you write her like this specific way? Because it feels like such a opposite of Melvin, and like kind of a foil, like get on each other's nerve, or like she gets on his nerves. So why this type of girl?
Yeah, well, I think you hit on it, and it is kind of like, subtract June, insert Myron, and it's like a very different situation, right? Like you have Melvin is very used to, just kind of like the day to day, the tempo with June, and now he's in a situation with somebody who he equally depends on, right? Because if Mirren wasn't there, he also wouldn't be doing anything. He doesn't know how to use, the internet or Google Maps or any of this, so he couldn't get where he was going to. Like, so she's the one that kind of helps him interact with the world around him, but also, like you said, like she's the opposite of him, right? Like she is an extreme extrovert. She wants to talk about everything. She wants to let you know what's going on in her mind. She wants you to know that song that she heard that she really likes. She wants to show you the pictures that she took. Like it just never stops. And she's got that energy. Like, and I think we all know people like that who just, they have these infinite reserves of just like social energy that you're like, man, like I wish I could, but it just seems exhausting. Like you're always on. But in that same way, like I think you get the reverse of that too, where it's like, in issue 2, you kind of get a little bit behind, the way that she thinks, where she's like, I am always on. I can't turn it off. I don't know how to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that she wants to be like that all the time. It's that she doesn't know any other way to be. And it's, that really gets to Melvin of like, I also don't know any other way to be. And like, now we're together. So like, I see you as somebody who, we may not be the same, but we are in a lot of ways, and wanting to, nurture that connection between them. And so I think it's, it's fun because you get to write Melvin being, constantly annoyed, and you get to write Marin being very much just like animated and all over the place. But it is a good, kind of energy to bounce off of as you kind of see their relationship develop throughout the story of how, they come to not just understand each other, but like become a team and work together.
The Modern Living Core, right? Modern Living
Mm-hmm.
MLC. This, I assume, I mean, I could already see the commentary of like on AI and how much it's like it's introducing itself into, I'm trying to write the right words, not infecting, introducing itself into our into our culture and like work and personal, and there's already like impacts on kids and adults like that are happening from the prevalence of AI. What is
Mm-hmm.
that something you were thinking about with MLC? Like, are they based on a certain company? Like, talk to me about that a little bit.
Yeah, it's interesting because me and Adigan, the artist, started working on this maybe a year after the Milestone initiative wrapped. So it's been about like 4 years, 3.5 years of like, kind of bringing this to life, but also in that time trying to keep up with a lot of the stuff that's been going on that are some of the central themes of the story. And I was just telling people the other day, like if I had known where we would be when the book released, I would have gone harder on things because it just didn't seem like, not even that it was possible to be where we are now with like these huge data centers, like using a year's worth of water in a day, or like, like stressing the electrical grids, or all of these other things that I've learned about, not that long ago, just in terms of how, not only how AI is being, resourced in terms of like natural resources, but also like human resources, like the people that they're using to train, all the models, but then also, like you were saying, the effects that it's having on people just generally.
Yes, sorry, you paused. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I was thinking Amazon just in terms of like this one-stop shop company where it's just like, if you took the concept of a sentient corporation to its, final development, like it would just be profit at any cost, right? Like it would be like we need to make money. It doesn't matter how we make the money, as long as we're making more money than we made in the previous quarter in the previous year. So like how can we do that? And not having any human emotions or morality or anything like that, you kind of get into these sticky situations where it's just like, well, humans are resources. Like humans are things that we can use to make more money and more profit. And even in the world we live in, pre AI, like we knew a lot of things. We knew the clothes that we were wearing came from some place that maybe wasn't as ethical as we would have liked. We knew that, the person who just delivered our, Grubhub order probably is making pennies on the dollar. Like we knew, like, a lot of this stuff, and we continue to kind of engage in this culture. And so the way that you could see AI moving, where it's like, well, we know the downsides, we know all the things that are coming with it, but like, are we going to take the steps to actually prevent, the worst of the worst, or are we just gonna keep rolling with it? So I think, a lot of the commentary is just kind of doing a dig into 3 years ago what I perceived AI to be. And like I said, like, man, if I would have known, like, boy, not the book would have been different, but I think, some of the commentary that I make later in the story would have been like a lot more like on the head.
Mm. Yeah, I figured that. That's a fair. I think it's hard to like predict the like. I don't think anyone realized what the impacts of like artificial intelligence or whatever would have on our modern day society. So I think it's like kind of hard to like figure that out. But it's to your point where things just capitalism and like the machine keeps rolling because it needs money and it needs more things. And eventually human beings will just get automated out of that system. I mean, we already
Yeah.
the dead internet theory where it's just like bots engaging with ads and like that's good enough for them. Like it
Yeah.
makes sense kind of the direction that things are heading. And it's like a little crazy. But to tie back to MLC and like June, okay, so as a Black woman, I always get concerned about anything bad happening to a Black woman. So June, and I love that she's having her own arc and her own story. Like that's really awesome. But I'm also very unsettled by where she is at and
Mhm.
the indignity and like debasement that those prisoners are going through is so awful. Like where did you pull that out of your head? Like that's crazy.
Well, so a few things about June, because initially, when I was thinking about the story, like I wanted to have a way for them to be separated, right? And so like the typical comics thing is like, well, his wife is dead, right? Dead wife, step one, and then move on from there. And it's like, well, that seems A, terrible, but B, like there's got to be a way that not only can they still have this adventure where where they're separated from each other and they're trying to find each other, but also that gives June this sense of autonomy that she's able to you're able to see like why she is so important to Melvin, but also like why she is the way that she is, right? Because like in a situation like this, I think a lot of people would be like, well, this is maybe the worst thing I could have imagined happening to me. And like, I guess there's nothing I can do about it. And immediately she's like, I gotta go. I gotta get out of here. I can't be in here anymore. Like I need to leave. And so, you kind of see her not just constantly fighting back against this system, but like as the story goes on, like, she is somebody who I really wanted to make sure in the end of the story, like it's Melvin's story. Melvin is the main character, but like Melvin and June are equals, and like she might not have the ability to access Black history as a superpower or any of that other stuff, but you can see just how through her spirit, through her determination, through her intelligence, through her just general people skills. I think a lot of the times when we think about what makes somebody successful or what makes somebody important, a lot of it is like these very hard skills that we value that like make somebody feel like, oh, they must know what they're doing because they look important and they're in charge and they're loud and they're saying all these things. But June, I think, is a good, uh, you know, a good way to look at those soft skills that I think make people not just equally successful, but like can really do so much more than I think those hard skills get you, because like, being intimidating, being scary, being like powerful is like, all right, like you can keep people in line, but like being nurturing, being somebody who builds people up, being somebody who connects people, being somebody that makes somebody feel like they have value. Like when you're able to build a community like that, when you're able to make those connections, when you're able to remain firm, on beliefs and values, but also like make space for others to come in and be collaborative. Like I think a lot of people maybe don't look at those skills or value them in the way of like, oh, that's the kind of leader that I want. But I feel like June very much so is that person where like she's got her say and she's going to say it, but she's not somebody who's just going to like completely block everything else out because she has to be the one in charge. And so by the end of the story, you kind of see how, she goes from the situation that you find her in issue 2 to kind of like turning the whole thing on its head, where she is the problem in a good way, right? She becomes a problem for the MLC in a way that like they couldn't have conceived of, because why would anybody fight back? And she's like, that's all she knows how to do is to fight back. So like by the time that her and Melvin, eventually have their reconnection, like you'll see that both of them are very different places, but I think, when they come back together, it's like they're even stronger than they were when they were together before.
Love. Can you tease something from future issues that you
Oh
want to
boy.
mention?
Yeah, I would say so. Issue 3 just came out. Issue 4 is maybe my favorite issue of the series. Issue 4 is a bit of a flashback to a lot of different events in June and Melvin's life, kind of how their relationship built up, and like not simply just how they got together, but like a lot of the major moments in their life. And so you're kind of seeing that relationship play out, but also like again getting even more and more like what makes them who they are, and what makes them who they are individually, but also what makes them who they are as a couple, as a unit. And then in the final issue, which comes out in December, um, generally like Adigan is incredible, and it's like a very very great opportunity, I feel, not only to get to work with him now, just because like he's gonna be one of those people in like 2 to 3 years. I feel like, whether it's working at DC, whether it's working at Marvel, whether it's working on his own things. So being able to get in early, and have a project with him now feels like a blessing. But also like he's somebody who I really value just in terms of collaboration, where I'm able to send, the script to him, and we, kind of talk about it and, different ways that we could do things. But every time I get those pages back, I'm like, man, like that's better. You know what I mean? Like he took what I was thinking and made it even better than I could have even, thought up in my mind. So there's a couple of pages in issue 5, and I'm like, damn, like I'm glad we got to work together, but also like, man, I can't wait until people see that and check that out.
Yes, I was like, Adigan is doing Poison Ivy, which is one of my favorite runs, and like he's just killing it over
Yep,
there. So yeah,
absolutely.
his work on this book is fantastic. I just love
Yes.
I especially love just Melvin's look and the way he looks, because he just looks like one of my uncles, like, and my dad, and
Hmm.
like I appreciate that look a lot. So what else are you working on? What's next for you? But after Ancestral Recall ends, more
Uh,
Ancestral Recall.
hopefully more Ancestral Recall. You know what I mean? Like it's always one of those things where sell enough copies, get enough buzz, get enough people talking about it. They'll say, let's do it again. And both of us would certainly love to do it again. So if you've been enjoying the series, like keep spreading the word, keep letting people know, and hopefully we'll get to do some more. I've got a few things that are in pitches, like where we're talking them out, so hopefully those are things that I can talk about at a later date. But just on my own, I'm trying to work out 2 anthologies. One of them is basically like the Green Book for Black people as time travelers. So like if you go to this company and it's like, all right, so like you want to go to this juke joint, like between this hour and this hour is good, so you got an hour to like go and hang out, and then like not like anything happens afterwards, but just like this is it's a good time from this time to this time, right? Like you want to go see Prince backstage, like here's like this little snippet where you can go and check that out. So trying to do it where it's like it's real history, it's real things that have happened, but then it's also a little bit of like, all right, we don't know the whole story, there's bits and pieces that we're missing, but like if we were to imagine what happened, like
Mhm.
here's a version of that. So that's an anthology that I'm working on now. Hopefully, I'll have more to talk about that later.
That's
And
cool.
then there's another project that I'm working on, which is basically like a Black culture handbook, which would be, just like, why do we do these things? Like, why do we, like DAP is something that I do know about just because like it came from soldiers in Vietnam, and they brought it back to America. But there's other things like why do we play spades? Where
Mhm.
did double dutch come from? Like roller skating, certain
So cute.
foods, like different hairstyles. Like there's a lot of things that like we just do, and like you don't think about it because it just seems like a natural cultural thing that like it's just your uncle did it, yeah. Right, like you're at the cookout and everybody's line dancing, and it's just like, yeah, well you just do that. um so it's a bit of an investigation. It's like, well, where did those things come from? But having it in kind of like a digest size book where it's just like, oh, here's the answer, right? Like you're thinking about, well, where did that come from? Okay, you can just open the book to this page, find it out, but also have it made in a way that it's like you can just pass it on, to whoever. Like if anybody's ever like, oh man, like I was just thinking about X, Y, and Z. It's like, here, read this. Like here's this might be what you're looking for. Um, so those are two things that hopefully I will be crowdfunding in the next year or so. So um, be on the lookout for those.
I love those two concepts. You're like finding your niche in historical Black history. Like that's really cool. That's awesome.
I think it's something, I don't like to think of the work sometimes in the sense of like, this is important, like people should be doing this, I should be doing this, but like specifically now more and more, again, just thinking larger real world picture, like Black history is being erased, in real time. Like they are trying to keep a
Mhm.
lot of these things from you, and there's a
Mhm.
reason that they want to keep them from you. And I feel like making these stories and making a lot of this stuff as accessible as possible is it is important work. Like again, like I don't want to like make it seem like grander than it is, but I do think that it is something that should be considered and should be thought about. So no matter how small of an act it might be, I think putting together projects like that can make the history accessible, but also make it like readable and enjoyable. Like it's not work. It's not something that it's like, oh man, I gotta read this, or like this got assigned to me. It's like, oh, like I got a project that I have to do, and I can read this book and like find something in here that gives me the ability to turn around and be like, oh yeah, like I personally learned about this town in Texas in like the 1800s, 1900s, where it was like a lot of the Wild West early bank robbers were like out there, like doing what they were doing. But there is this one town in Texas, all Black town. Never went there. Never tried it.
Mhm.
Billy the Kid, none of them, because they were like, all the Black people there, like they're not gonna go for it, right? One gang tried to do it because they were like, what are all these Black people gonna do? They all beat their ass. They dragged them
Mhm.
out of the bank because they're like, that's our money. Like
Yeah.
that's all of our money. You know what I mean? So like, no, we're not gonna let you do that, right? And so there's instances like that where it's just like, I mean,
That's cool.
obviously you're not gonna learn that in school, but it's also like that's cool to know though. Like that's
Yeah.
very interesting information. So stories like that where I would love to kind of share that and spread that around more. And I feel like comics is a great medium to do that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your time, Jordan. This has been an awesome conversation, and I hope I hope Ancestral Recall like goes off and you keep doing more of it. And but I'm also like excited to see your next two projects. It's like that sounds awesome. We'll be supporting. Thank you so much.
Absolutely appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah.